I met Amanda at a tech conference in San Francisco 4 years ago. Her smile lit up the room as she confidently presented marketing strategies that left everyone impressed. We connected over coffee afterward, and I was captivated by her intelligence and charm. 3 wonderful years later, we had built what I thought was the perfect relationship. We talked about marriage, kids, and growing old together on our porch. But then one night while we were having dinner, a text notification flashed across her phone. "Miss you so much." Something in my gut tightened. Before I continue this story that changed everything I thought I knew about love and trust, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever had that gut feeling something was not right in your relationship. The day I met Amanda still feels vivid in my memory. I was 32, working as a software engineer for a major tech company in Seattle. The conference in San Francisco brought together the brightest minds in technology and marketing. Amanda gave a presentation about digital marketing strategies that had the entire audience hanging on her every word. Her confidence was magnetic. After her talk, I gathered enough courage to approach her at the refreshment table. "Your presentation was incredible," I said, trying not to sound like every other tech guy probably hitting on her that day. She smiled, thanking me while maintaining eye contact that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We ended up talking for hours at a nearby cafe. She was a marketing executive for a competing firm, but that only added to the excitement. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from work to personal interests, and by the end of that evening I knew I wanted to see her again. Our early dating phase was magical. Despite living in different cities, we made it work. I would fly to San Francisco some weekends, and she would come to Seattle on others. We explored coffee shops tucked away in hidden corners of both cities. We hiked trails throughout Washington state, with Amanda always taking breathtaking photographs of the landscape. Weekend getaways to small coastal towns became our specialty. Amanda was unlike anyone I had ever dated. Her intelligence was matched only by her ambition. She had plans to eventually start her own marketing firm and talked about it with such passion that I could not help but be swept up in her dreams. There was also an air of mystery about her past. She would mention fragments of stories from her childhood in Chicago but never delve too deeply. At the time, I found this intriguing rather than concerning. After dating for a year, I asked her to move in with me in Seattle. Her company had an office there, and she managed to arrange a transfer. Our apartment overlooking Puget Sound became our sanctuary. We furnished it together, blending our styles into something that felt uniquely ours. The morning light streaming through our windows as we sipped coffee and planned our days became my favorite part of each day. My family embraced Amanda immediately. My parents, who still lived in the suburbs of Seattle, invited us over for dinner every Sunday. My sister Jessica and Amanda formed a close bond, often going shopping or to yoga classes together. "You hit the jackpot with this one," my mom would whisper to me in the kitchen, while Amanda charmed my father with discussions about his woodworking hobby in the living room. Amanda spoke fondly of her family in Chicago. Her parents were both professors, she said, and her younger brother was in medical school. They were extremely busy, which explained why they never visited. We had plans to visit them for Thanksgiving, but something always came up to postpone the trip. Work emergencies, family health issues, renovation projects at their home. There was always a reasonable excuse. Our life together fell into a comfortable routine. Weekdays were filled with work evenings with home-cooked meals or trying new restaurants in the city. Date nights every Friday were sacred to us, no work calls or distractions allowed. Weekends often involved brunches with friends, hiking when the weather permitted, or lazy days, reading books by the fireplace during the infamous Seattle rainy season. As our 3-year anniversary approached, I began planning to propose. I had booked a trip to Hawaii, researched the perfect beach for sunset proposal, and even contacted a photographer to capture the moment. The ring was hidden in my sock drawer, a platinum band with a diamond that reminded me of the sparkle in her eyes when she laughed. Looking back now, there were red flags I chose to ignore. Amanda was reluctant to introduce me to her friends from work. "They are not that interesting," she would say. "I would rather spend my free time with you." It seemed romantic at the time, but now I recognize it as the first brick in a wall of isolation. Her business trips increased in frequency during our second year together. What started as once every few months became twice monthly expeditions to Portland, Los Angeles, and sometimes Chicago to visit family. The trips always seemed to fall on weekends, and her explanations about the timing grew increasingly vague. Then there were the secretive phone calls. She would step outside onto our balcony to take certain calls, claiming the reception was better out there. Even in pouring rain, she would stand with an umbrella, speaking in hushed tones. When she returned, her explanation was always work-related, but her expression often seemed guarded. Whenever I asked about her childhood or college years, Amanda would share brief anecdotes before skillfully changing the subject. "Enough about my boring past," she would say. "Tell me more about that project you are working on." Her deflection tactics were so smooth that I barely noticed them at the time. The first major inconsistency came during a casual dinner conversation. Amanda mentioned sending her father a birthday gift, saying she hoped it would arrive in time for his birthday celebration in June. A cold sensation washed over me as I recalled her previously mentioning his November birthday when we had discussed astrological signs months earlier. When I pointed this out, she laughed it off, saying I must have misheard her the first time. I accepted her explanation, pushing aside the unsettling feeling that had begun to take root. The text message that ultimately cracked the foundation of my trust arrived on a Thursday evening. Amanda and I were having dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant downtown. Her phone lit up on the table, displaying a message preview. "Miss, you cannot wait for next weekend," from someone saved simply as J. She quickly flipped the phone over, but not before I caught a glimpse. A war began in my mind that night. One side argued for trust. Perhaps it was a colleague excited about a work project. The other side whispered suspicions that had been accumulating like dust in the corners of our relationship. I had always prided myself on being a trusting partner, not the jealous type who snooped through phones or demanded explanations for every text message. But something about her reaction, the slight flush in her cheeks, the way she changed the subject to an elaborate story about her day, felt performative. "Who is Jay?" I asked casually between bites of pasta, trying to keep my voice light. Amanda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Just a new client. Very demanding. Always texting at inappropriate hours." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "You know how it is." I nodded, pretending to accept this explanation, but the seed of doubt had been planted and was already taking root. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing patterns I had previously overlooked. Amanda would take her laptop to the bathroom during video calls, claiming she needed to multitask during her quick break. These bathroom breaks sometimes lasted 15 or 20 minutes. She would emerge with slightly different makeup or hair arrangement, as though she had been preparing for something or someone else. The discovery that changed everything happened by accident. Amanda was at a yoga class, and I was searching for our car keys, which I had misplaced. While checking her gym bag that sat by the door, my fingers touched something hard and rectangular beneath her yoga pants. A phone, but not the iPhone I was familiar with. This was an older model Samsung one I had never seen before. I stood there for what felt like hours, the second phone burning in my hand like a hot coal. Every value I held about privacy and trust screamed at me to put it back. Yet something stronger, self-preservation perhaps, urged me to look. With shaking hands, I turned it on. The phone had no passcode. The wallpaper showed Amanda with a man I had never seen before. They were standing in front of a craftsman-style house, his arm around her waist, both smiling broadly. They looked comfortable together. Familiar. Domestic. My legs gave way as I sank onto the floor, still clutching the phone. With rising nausea, I opened the text messages. There were daily exchanges with Michael, filled with the mundane details of shared lives, discussions about groceries, childcare schedules, home repairs. There were photos of 2 young children, a boy and a girl, both with Amanda's eyes. The most shocking discovery was an address saved in the Notes app, an apartment in Portland. According to the text, that was where Allison lived during the week when she was working in Seattle. Allison, not Amanda. I carefully returned the phone exactly as I had found it, and spent the night in a daze, moving through our apartment, looking at our photographs, our shared belongings, wondering how much of it was real. Sleep eluded me entirely. The next morning I called in sick to work and began a careful investigation. I found a credit card statement Amanda had left in our home office. It showed purchases for children's clothing, toys, and school supplies in Portland. There were regular payments to a daycare center. The evidence was mounting, yet I still could not fully accept what it was telling me. After weeks of internal conflict, I made the difficult decision to hire a private investigator. It felt like a betrayal, but I needed to know the full truth before confronting her. The cost was substantial, $3,000 that I withdrew from my savings in cash, but the price of continuing to live in deception would be far greater. 2 weeks later, the investigator delivered his report, and my world collapsed entirely. Amanda was indeed Allison Jenkins, married to Michael Jenkins for 7 years. They had 2 children, Emma age 6 and James age 4. They owned a home in a Portland suburb. She had created the Amanda Parker identity 5 years ago and maintained separate lives in each city. Her supposed marketing executive position was real, but it was part-time, allowing her the flexibility to maintain her elaborate deception. The physical symptoms of my shock were immediate and overwhelming. I vomited in my bathroom, then sat on the cold tile floor for hours, unable to move. The betrayal was so complete, so meticulously planned, that I could not comprehend it. This was not a simple affair or a lie about an ex. This was an entire fabricated life sustained over years with careful precision. I called my sister, barely able to form coherent sentences through my tears. She came immediately, staying with me as I alternated between rage, despair, and numbness. "You need to confront her," Jessica said, holding my hand. "But first you need a plan." The question of how to approach the confrontation consumed me. Should I simply disappear from Amanda's, or rather Allison's, life, without explanation? Should I contact her husband? The thought of another victim in this deception made my heart ache for a stranger I had never met. I scheduled an emergency session with a therapist who helped me process the immediate trauma and think through my options. "This is not your fault," she emphasized repeatedly. "This level of deception reflects pathology in her, not any failure in you." Those words became my lifeline in the darkest moments. I spent the next 2 weeks meticulously gathering evidence. I photographed the second phone while Amanda was showering, captured screenshots of her social media posts that contradicted her whereabouts, and created a detailed timeline of her trips away that aligned perfectly with school events and family celebrations in Portland. I printed bank statements showing transfers between accounts with different names. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of what I had believed was the most important relationship of my life. The evidence filled a 3-ring binder that I kept locked in my office desk. I created digital backups stored in an encrypted folder. The methodical collection helped me maintain sanity when everything else felt like shifting sand beneath my feet. The final, most devastating discovery came through digital forensic software. A tech friend helped me run on our shared laptop. Hidden in a password-protected folder were journal entries Amanda had been keeping about our relationship. She was using our life together as material for a novel she was writing about manipulating men. There were detailed notes about my reactions to her stories, analyses of how quickly I accepted her lies and strategies she employed to deepen my attachment. "Subject H continues to demonstrate remarkable malleability," she wrote in one entry. "His emotional dependence makes him an ideal case study." Reading those words, something hardened inside me. The pain transformed into cold resolve. I would confront her when she returned from her business trip to Portland, where I now knew she was simply living her real life with her husband and children. I prepared meticulously for her return. I practiced what I would say with my therapist, role-playing different scenarios. I cleaned the apartment, packed her belongings into boxes, and placed them in the spare room. I made sure all my financial accounts were secure. I changed the passwords on all my devices and accounts. The night before her scheduled return, I barely slept. I paced my apartment, rehearsing my words, trying to predict her responses. I set up legal recording devices throughout the living room. Washington, being a one-party consent state, meant I could legally record our conversation without informing her. When Amanda walked through the door that Sunday evening, she was smiling, carrying a small gift bag. "I brought you something from Portland," she said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my face away and her lips brushed my cheek instead. Her expression shifted, registering the unusual coldness in my demeanor. "We need to talk, Allison," I said quietly, using her real name for the first time. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "What did you call me?" she whispered. I gestured to the living room couch. "Please sit down. I think it is time we had an honest conversation about your family in Portland, about Michael, about Emma and James." She remained standing, her body tense like a cornered animal. "I do not know what you are talking about. My name is Amanda. You know that." I calmly opened the binder on the coffee table and began laying out photographs, documents, and transcripts. "Your performance has been remarkable, truly. Creating and maintaining two separate lives takes extraordinary organization and commitment. But it is over now." Her denial transformed into anger so quickly it was startling. "You went through my things. You spied on me. What kind of person does that? The kind who discovers their partner of 3 years has been lying about everything from their name to their marital status." I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Inside. The kind who finds out they are actually a character in someone else's book." Her expression changed again, calculation replacing anger. "Hugh, baby, I can explain all of this. It is not what it looks like." "Actually, it is exactly what it looks like," I said, opening her journal entries on my laptop. "You have documented it quite thoroughly yourself." As she realized the extent of what I had discovered, Amanda's mask fell away completely. She sat down heavily on the couch, no longer attempting to maintain the character she had played for years. "It started as research," she said, her voice different, somehow harder, more clipped. "I am writing a psychological thriller about double lives. I needed to understand the dynamics firsthand. And your husband and children, are they research too? Michael knows about my work. We have an arrangement." I laughed without humor. "That is not what his text messages suggest. Shall I show you those as well? I particularly enjoyed his plans for your anniversary next month." The full confession came in fragments between attempts at manipulation. Yes, she was married. Yes, she had created the Amanda persona specifically to find a secondary relationship that would provide material for her book. No, her husband had no idea. The children believed she traveled for work. Everything about her life with me had been carefully constructed fiction. What struck me most was her complete lack of remorse. She spoke about our relationship as a social experiment, analyzing which of her techniques had been most effective in securing my devotion. "You were the perfect subject, Hugh," she said with clinical detachment. "Trusting, emotionally available, isolated enough from family to allow me plenty of freedom." When she realized I was unmoved by her explanations, her strategy shifted to threats. "If you expose me, I will destroy you," she said coldly. "I will tell everyone you were abusive. I will contact your company with allegations that will end your career. Think carefully about what you do next." Something in me snapped at that moment. 3 years of lies culminating in threats rather than apologies was more than I could bear. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You have 1 hour to take what you can carry. The rest I will have delivered to an address of your choosing. But you will never set foot in this apartment again." She tried several more angles. Tears, seduction, more threats. But my resolve remained unbroken. Eventually, she packed a suitcase in stony silence and left, slamming the door behind her. I thought her departure would bring immediate relief, but instead I collapsed onto the floor, violent sobs tearing through my body. Everything I had believed about my life for 3 years had been a performance, a data collection exercise for someone who viewed me as nothing more than research material. The next morning, my phone began ringing with unfamiliar Chicago numbers. Amanda's supposed family was calling to plead her case. They were, I learned, friends who had played along with her deception, providing cover stories and false backgrounds. Some did not even know the full extent of her lies. I blocked each number after briefly explaining that I knew the truth. The final blow came 3 days later when my boss called me into his office. Amanda had contacted the Human Resources Department with claims that I had been tracking her movements and harassing her. She says you have become obsessed and potentially dangerous, my boss said uncomfortably. Human Resources needs to investigate. I realized then that I needed to fight back methodically rather than just defend myself. I consulted with an attorney specializing in defamation and harassment cases. You have exceptionally strong documentation, she told me after reviewing my evidence. But this will be a marathon, not a sprint. My support system proved invaluable during this time. My parents opened their home to me when I needed escape from the apartment filled with memories. My sister Jessica screened my calls and emails, protecting me from Amanda's continued attempts at contact. Friends took turns staying with me during the first difficult weeks, ensuring I ate and slept. The carefully documented evidence saved my professional reputation. I provided my employer with a redacted version of the private investigator's report, along with evidence of Amanda's deception. I am the victim here, I explained calmly to the Human Resources representative. I discovered my partner was living a double life and confronted her with evidence. Now she is retaliating with false allegations. The investigation concluded in my favor, and additional security measures were implemented to prevent Amanda from accessing our building. After Amanda began showing up at my workplace and apartment, I filed for a restraining order. The court hearing was surreal, sitting across from someone I had once planned to marry, now legally requesting that she stay away from me. The judge granted the order after reviewing my documentation and the recording of our confrontation. Reclaiming my life and apartment became a methodical process. I repainted rearranged furniture and replaced bedding anything to erase the visual reminders of Amanda. I established new routines, joining a rock climbing gym and a book club to fill evenings that suddenly stretched emptily before me. I returned to therapy twice weekly, working through the trauma of such profound betrayal. The most difficult decision was whether to contact Michael, Amanda's husband. After much consideration and discussion with my therapist, I decided he deserved to know the truth. I compiled a digital package of evidence that could be verified independently and sent it through his work email with a brief, compassionate note explaining who I was and expressing my regret at being the bearer of such news. His response came 3 days later, a simple message thanking me for my honesty and asking if we could speak by phone. Our conversation was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. We were strangers connected by intimate knowledge of the same woman, a woman who had deceived us both completely. He had discovered additional evidence after receiving my message, including financial accounts and correspondence with publishers about her book. Michael and I formed an unexpected alliance. We compared timelines and stories, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of Amanda's deception. We both underwent testing for sexually transmitted infections. We coordinated our legal responses to her ongoing harassment. There was a strange comfort in knowing someone else understood exactly what I was experiencing. Together, we created a private digital record documenting Amanda's behavior, accessible only if someone contacted either of us claiming to be her next victim. We were not seeking revenge, but protection for ourselves and others who might fall into her carefully constructed traps. Amanda's attempts at character assassination continued. She created social media posts suggesting I was unstable and dangerous. She contacted mutual friends with elaborate stories about my supposed controlling behavior. But the extensive evidence I had gathered spoke louder than her accusations. Friends who initially distanced themselves began to return, apologizing for briefly doubting me. Despite the emotional turmoil, I found myself excelling professionally. Perhaps channeling my energy into work provided necessary distraction, or maybe the experience had given me a new perspective on what constituted an actual crisis. I was offered a promotion to lead a new development team, a position I might have declined before doubting my leadership abilities. The legal system eventually provided resolution. After multiple violations of the restraining order, Amanda faced serious legal consequences. Her publisher dropped her book contract when the unethical nature of her research came to light. The court mandated therapy and community service, along with stricter enforcement of the no-contact order. My healing journey continued through therapy support groups for survivors of psychological abuse and gradually rebuilding my capacity to trust. I learned to recognize the difference between healthy skepticism and paralyzing suspicion. I developed stronger boundaries and greater awareness of relationship red flags. 6 months after the confrontation, I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood. I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a loyal companion, who asked nothing of me except food walks and affection. I began volunteering as a peer counselor for others who had experienced relationship deception, finding that helping others navigate similar pain accelerated my own healing. The most challenging aspect was learning to trust my judgment again. Amanda's betrayal had made me question every instinct, every decision. My therapist helped me recognize that the problem had never been my capacity for trust, but her extraordinary commitment to deception. Some people could have lived with her for 20 years and never discovered the truth she told me. You listened to your intuition when something felt wrong. That is strength, not weakness. Gradually, I came to see the experience not as a failure but as painful growth. I had survived something that once seemed unsurvivable. I had maintained my integrity in the face of manipulation. I had rebuilt my life on a foundation of hard-won wisdom rather than bitterness. 1 year after discovering Amanda's double life, I barely recognized the man I was before. The promotion at work has evolved into a new position with greater responsibility and creative freedom. My new apartment, while smaller, feels more authentically mine than the space we shared ever did. Weekends are filled with hiking photography and genuine friendships, rather than performances and lies. I have taken tentative steps back into dating, approaching new relationships with healthy boundaries and clear communication. I am transparent about my past experience without allowing it to dominate new connections. The right person, I have learned, respects caution born of experience and demonstrates trustworthiness through consistency rather than demanding blind faith. Last month, I received an unexpected email from a woman in Denver. She had met Amanda using yet another name and had begun a relationship before discovering discrepancies in her stories. A mutual acquaintance who knew my story connected us. "You saved me from years of deception," she wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to create that record. There is peace in knowing that my pain served a purpose beyond my own growth. That perhaps others have been spared similar experiences because I chose to document and share the truth rather than disappear in shame. The cycle of deception has been interrupted, at least in this instance. The most profound lesson from this experience has been about the nature of trust itself. Trust should never be blind faith, but earned through consistent honesty and transparency. Yet withholding trust entirely means missing the genuine connections that make life meaningful. The balance lies in verifying what can be verified while remaining open to authentic relationship. Pain can transform us without defining us. The betrayal I experienced could have hardened me permanently, closed me off from vulnerability and connection. Instead, it clarified what matters: integrity, authenticity, and the courage to begin again after devastation. I have learned to listen to my intuition without surrendering to fear. The deception taught me to verify, but my heart taught me not to let one person's lies close me off from genuine connection. Life is too short and too precious to allow someone else's pathology to diminish your capacity for joy and authentic relationship. If you have ever experienced betrayal or deception in a relationship, I hope my story offers some measure of comfort. You are not alone, and the pain does not last forever. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a similar experience? Share your story in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more real-life experiences and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the most devastating betrayal. Thank you for listening. And remember, your capacity to trust again is not weakness, but the ultimate strength.